On November 27, 1978, tens of thousands of people gathered in total silence, holding candles as they marched to San Francisco's City Hall. The 2008 film Milk frames the events leading up to this vigil as a straightforward battle between a joyful progressive hero and a repressed homophobic villain. The actual history is more complex. San Francisco in the 1970s was a city hollowing out, caught in a demographic upheaval and a desperate vacuum of political power. The assassination was the breaking point of a decade-long demographic collision that a 2-hour film couldn't possibly contain. In the 1950s, the neighborhood known as Eureka Valley was a tightly knit working-class enclave. It was heavily Irish Catholic, anchored by families who relied on the city's unionized maritime and shipping jobs. As the shipping industry moved to Oakland, middle-class families left for the suburbs, and Eureka Valley property values crashed. These plummeting rents and cheap corner taverns created a refuge. Thousands of persecuted LGBTQ+ individuals migrated in, transforming the neighborhood into the Castro district. Harvey Milk arrived from New York and opened a camera shop right on Castro Street. He quickly realized that to stop targeted police raids, the growing demographic needed actual representation in City Hall, and he began to organize. Across the political aisle sat Dan White, a former police officer. He represented the old guard conservative families who felt alienated and displaced as their traditional neighborhood disappeared around them. Milk and White stood as the living embodiments of a city violently outgrowing its own past. Milk built his political power through an expansive coalition that had never been seen in the city's history. At the time, gay men and lesbians often occupied completely separate social spheres, so Milk bridged that divide by hiring a 22-year-old lesbian, Anne Cronenberg, to run his campaign. This newly united front utilized grassroots populist tactics to defeat Proposition 6. Proposition 6 was a 1978 ballot initiative that sought to ban gay and lesbian people from working in California's public schools. While Milk's political career rapidly ascended, White floundered with a failing restaurant and grew isolated on the board. White's primary issue was a profound feeling of political inadequacy. In fact, his own chief political advisor and campaign manager was a gay man, suggesting his friction with Milk was more about power than orientation. This decline culminated in the infamous Twinkie defense. While the media mocked the idea that sugar induced a murderous rage, psychologists in court actually presented White's sudden dietary shift to junk food as documented medical evidence of severe clinical depression. Milk secured his power by building broad, unexpected alliances. White's political and psychological collapse stemmed directly from his inability to adapt to a changing environment. By November 1978, San Francisco was consumed by an atmosphere of paranoia. Just 9 days prior, over 900 people died in the Jonestown massacre. The People's Temple, the religious cult responsible for the massacre, had direct political ties to both Mayor George Moscone and Harvey Milk. The tragedy added intense anxiety to a public that was already heavily traumatized. Under immense personal and financial strain, Dan White impulsively resigned from the Board of Supervisors. Days later, he reversed course and made a desperate plea to the mayor to be reinstated. White soon discovered that Harvey Milk actively lobbied Mayor Moscone to block his return to office. That revelation was the catalyst, turning White's deep, untreated depression into a vengeful rage. On November 27th, White snuck into City Hall through a basement window to avoid metal detectors. Armed with a revolver, he walked into the offices of Mayor Moscone and Supervisor Milk and murdered them both. Months later, a jury convicted White of voluntary manslaughter, handing down a lenient sentence. The community boiled over from years of tension and grief, erupting into the White Night riots, storming City Hall and setting police cars on fire. Harvey Milk's work organized a survival strategy for a community under siege, succeeding in a city defined by its own decline.